say it's not all my presentation. I have a lot of helpers here. Good evening, everyone, and on behalf of Roscommon Environmental Network, I'm delighted you're all here to see such a full house. I'm sorry we can't accommodate everybody who wanted to come in, but I hope we'll be able to repeat this event sometime. So the evening is a celebration of the river that runs through the heart of Boyle on its way from Lough Gara to the Shannon. And you know, the turning point of the 12th century when the Cistercian Abbey was founded by the MacDermots, it became the sort of definer of the urban recorded history of the town. But of course the river was important to the people who lived in the area and the natural history of the catchment long before that. So our presenters tonight will interpret many aspects of the river, its history and its ecology, as well as the art and the reflections that it has inspired. And I'll just run through the list of what you will hear tonight. The evening begins with a song from Francis Gaffney, followed by an archaeological tour along the river with Dr. Kieran O'Connor, and then a look at the history of the bridges of Boyle with Tony Conboy. Then Noreen Shryan and Professor Francis Lucy will describe their long-term work in monitoring and protecting the ecology and biodiversity of the river and its lakes and its current status. Michael O'Dowd has been observing the wildlife on the river from his office window over many years and will tell us something about what he's seen. Unfortunately, Barry Feely is unable to be here to talk about Lough Gara tonight, but James Canton will share his recollections about the river reaching back over several generations. And then Kay Baxter of the Inland Waterways Association of Ireland will tell us of their work in preserving access to the river for recreational users. So Boyle was one of the first towns in Ireland to have electric street lighting, and Neil Stewart will describe how Hydropower brought that about over a century ago. Then the evening concludes with a poem by Patrick Anderson McCoy called River of Journeys, and the short film that you just enjoyed will also close the programme. That was created by Tarloch O'Muelon, who also did the music for it, and I think set the ambience for the evening very nicely as you all came in. So I'd just like to say a word then about Roscommon Environmental Network. We're a local voluntary organisation set up in 2019, and we're working for a county that provides a healthy environment for people, plants and other creatures. And we're doing that mainly through events like this, focusing on building awareness of local environmental issues but also resources. And you can hear about upcoming events in the media from time to time. Or if you'd like to join our mailing list, it's going around the room this evening, and you could sign up for that. So thank you very much. Let's now begin with the music from Francis.
This event, but it was just during COVID times, and so a lot of the presenters here tonight, we did some presentations from home on Zoom or whatever at the time, so there wasn't such a crowd here. It was a bit easier. However, Michael asked me would I sing a song the last time we done this, so I did, and I sang a song about a water kind of based song, but I was just thinking about what I might sing tonight, and there's loads and loads of songs obviously written about the rivers around the world, some famous songs, Shenandoah and all these other songs, and the Mississippi Delta and all that stuff, but just there is also a very famous song about Monaster na Buaile, but it's in Shannos, and I don't sing Shannos, so but they do sing it in Connemara, and it's a fabulous song. I was just thinking about, conservation and everything, and just thinking about the great Pete Seeger, who wrote loads and loads of songs about rivers. And of course, his big campaign in his life, particularly in the later part of his life, was the River Hudson, which he lived on the shores of the River Hudson. And he called it a sewer when he went to live there first, and it was terribly polluted. And but he set about a campaign, and he brought he has a schooner, had a schooner boat on the river. He used to bring children up from the city of New York up the Hudson, and they'd spend weeks on the river, teach them about the ecology and what was happening to the river. And it has been a very successful campaign, because a lot of the River Hudson has come back to it. He was successful in that. But I have another song here that you'll probably recognise. It was written by Ewan MacColl, and it was written by Ewan MacColl back in the 60s, and he was married to Peggy Seeger, so that was Pete's sister. But they recorded this song on an album back in 1968, I think, and it was later taken up by Planksy, and it was recorded on the first major Planksy record, which was the first record they made, the famous, what they call the black covered album. But it's a love story based on the River Thames. So this is Ewan MacColl's. I met my love near Woolwich Field, beneath the Bay Queen standing. All the love I felt for her, it passed along understanding. Took her sailing on the river flow, sweet river flow. London town was mine to give her, sweet Thames flow softly. Lay the Thames into a crown, flow, sweet river flow. Made a brooch of silver town, sweet Thames flow softly. From Shadwell docks to Nine Elms Reach, we cheek to cheek were dancing. Her necklace made of London Bridge, her beauty was enhancing. Kissed her once again at Wapping Flow, sweet river flow. After that there was no stopping, sweet Thames flow softly. Gave the Richmond Park a twist, flow, sweet river flow. Into a bracelet for her wrist, sweet Thames flow softly. But now, alas, the tide has changed my love, she has gone from me. Winter's frost has touched my heart and put the blight upon me. Creeping fog is on the river flow, sweet river flow. Sun and moon and stars go with her, sweet Thames flow softly. Swift the Thames flows to the sea, flow, sweet river flow. Bearing ships and part of me, sweet Thames flow softly.
Yeah, okay, the title of this talk is The Archaeology of the Boyle River, and I've got 8 or 9 minutes to give it to you in, so I actually wrote out about 900 words. The Boyle River, as it works its way from Lough Gara past Boyle, into Lough Key, through Knockvicar, into Oakport Lough, past Coothall, then into Drumharlow Lough, eventually meeting the mighty Shannon at Tumnah, above Carrick, is full of evidence for past human activity from the earliest period onwards. At Kiltasheen, John Burke's land, who's here, for example, where the river emits eastwards from Lough Key, excavations by Finan and Reid uncovered evidence for artefacts made by hunter-gatherers during the late Mesolithic period, sometime between 6000 and 4000 BC. Going forward, evidence for the activities of early farmers dating to the Neolithic period, 4000 to 2400 BC, also occurred at Kiltasheen. Furthermore, a portal dolmen dating to the earlier part of the Neolithic can be seen at Drumanone above Boyle, and what was most likely a court tomb megalith occurs on the left bank of the river at Coothall, just in front of Tony Bambrick's house. Burial and ritual and religious ceremonies would have taken place at these sites during the Neolithic. The next period in time is the Bronze Age, which lasted from 2400 BC or so to 600 BC. Evidence for Bronze Age activity can be found along the Boyle River in the form of barrows and artefacts. For example, the early 17th century star-shaped artillery fort on the ridge above Boyle at Mockmoyne reused a Bronze Age barrow as one of its bastions. Henge monuments and burnt cooking mans dating to the Bronze Age have been recognised too in the Boyle area, close to the river, close to both sides of the river. Most spectacularly, next slide, in the 19th century at Tumnah, farmers digging spuds found the remains of a gold necklace and a bronze sword dating to about 600 BC, again right beside the river. The next period of time is, of course, the Iron Age, which saw the gradual introduction of iron weapons and tools. Again, the Iron Age dates from about 600 BC to the introduction of Christianity in the 5th century AD. Again, monuments linked to the the Iron Age include ring barrows, which we can see particularly to the south of the Boyle River and to the south of Boyle. The introduction of Christianity during the 5th and 6th century saw the beginnings of what scholarship called the early medieval period. This period ends circa 1100 AD. Early church sites, initially founded during early medieval times, even if the remains at them are a little later, have been recognised along the Boyle River, again at Kiltasheen, Assylin in Boyle, Kilbryan outside Boyle, close to the river, Churchill near Coothall, and Tumnah near Carrick. And very fine masonry churches dating to, we'll say, the 10th and 11th century can be seen today on Hermit Island and Church Island in Lough Key. Okay, yeah. Secular settlement during the period as well. Earthen ring forts can be seen, they occur in profusion along the Boyle River, and ring forts were semi-defended farmsteads built in their thousands in Ireland during the period from about 500 to about 1000 AD or so. Mixed farming with an emphasis on dairying took place at these sites. Huge numbers occur just on either side of the river. For example, Derry McQuirk townland, just where the Boyle River emits from Lough Gara, has 4 ring forts within them. Tom Martin's cow, Violet, is there. I think Tom had sold
1947 AD.
Yeah, thank you. Anyway, the other monument, of course, that we associate with the early medieval period is the Crannog artificial island. Artificial islands, and again the upper reaches of the Boyle River in Lough Gara are full of crannogs. The work of Christina Friedengren in the noughties and Joe Raftery of the National Museum in the 1950s uncovered a whole series of crannogs. But crannogs also occur, and they can be seen today on Lough Key, Oakport Lough, and Drumharlow Lough. Okay, next slide. Yeah, and the next period, the later medieval period, dates to the centuries between circa 1100 and 1600 AD. And to me, the Boyle River, in its wider sense, including the lakes, has some of the best monastic remains of this period in the island of Ireland as a whole. And these, of course, include the very fantastic Cistercian monastery at Boyle. Those masonry remains date to either side of 1200. And of course, the pre-Monstratensian monastery on Trinity Island as well, out in Lough Key, both founded under MacDermot patronage in the late 12th and early 13th century. Next slide, yeah. The great secular centre, if you like, during later medieval times in the area is, of course, the Rock of Lough Key, currently being excavated by Tom Finan of St. Louis University. It seems to have started out as a cashel-like enclosure sited on a semi-natural, semi-artificial island out on Lough Key. In later times, a tower house castle was built on it too. This is all before the Nash work of the early 19th century. Next slide. Also, moated sites, again, semi-defended farmsteads originally, dating to the late 13th and early 14th century, occur at Cuppina, where the river comes out of Lough Key, Rockingham, associated with the Rock of Lough Key, and here at Inishitira Island on Drumharlow Lough, near where the river hits the Shannon. Again, going forward, I've gone from the Mesolithic now, I'm finishing with the 17th century. The 17th century AD saw the complete conquest of Ireland by the English. Monuments of this period along the river include the very well preserved Bawn Castle, lived in by the Lenahans at Clegna, Coote Hall, built in around 1610 by Sir Charles Coote, and of course the star-shaped artillery fort at Mockmoyne, Boyle, overlooking the river, covering the river, if you like, already mentioned earlier, a couple of minutes earlier. Just finishing off now. So we've gone to the 17th century. The short review of the surviving archaeology along the Boyle River system shows how rich it is in the physical remains of the past. Countless generations of our ancestors have left their mark on this riverine and lakeland landscape. So that's me over. So thank you for listening.
We'll start the clock again. Okay. Thank you for having me, as they say on CNN. I opened an address once with the salute that I'm very pleased to see such a dense crowd here. I didn't repeat that. My stand, of course, is on the bridges. All rivers have bridges, of course. The term bridges has a very positive connotation in its own right. Rivers are hugely important in the infrastructure of all civilizations. They are celebrated in history, literature, and on the film screens. In some countries, actually, they are regarded as religious icons such as the Ganges, the Nile, and so on. Much heard in poetry. T.S. Eliot's The Way sang, a crowd moved over London Bridge. And more dramatically, some senior people here, and there aren't that many, I suppose, up to my age. Anyway, Aubrey de Vere, The Ballad of Athlone, does any man dream of a gale can fear, of 1,000 deeds let him learn but one. The Shannon swept onwards, broad and clear, between the Leaguers and broad Athlone. Patrick Cavan, of course, So it said, "Oh, commemorate me where there is water, canal water, preferably." And Frank O'Malley in the local church here from time to time used to do these little rivulets in the church. Rivers were there to be crossed and bridges emerged or grew in the appropriate location from shallow fords, or as they're called, ats in the stream area. And I come from a place near at Lee to the ones we see today. The Boyle River, and how many do you think how many bridges do you think there are between Lough Gara and Lough Keys? Can think of anyone ventured? Six. Well, there are something like 10. And they start off with, I'm going to shoot through these now, Cloncully. The first one, not there, go back again. Here, coming forward. They may not be going. Okay. You're at the end of them there. Okay, I'll run through some of those. Cloncully is the first one I read. And then there's a couple now which isn't there because I haven't got it there. And with Temple Roman Graveyard on the other side. You have Dr. Bernard Maguire's bridge, which he brought from Liverpool, a kind of a Bailey bridge. The very impressive railway bridge at Felton, Archaeology, which can be seen from Assy. Stewart's had a service bridge that is closed now just to link Tarman with St. Patrick's Street. The Central Town Bridge, which is the main bridge here, and I'll return to that. There's the Central Town Bridge, come on, Johnny. The pedestrian green bridge, which is there, lovely bridge, which is flower bedecked for the Gala Festival. Then you have the new bridge as it's called down here, this one here near the convent, opposite the convent, built in the 1830s, 1837 or so. And when the town was slightly bypassed. Then you have Abbeytown Bridge, and Abbeytown Bridge is very, very important bridge. It's one of the oldest bridges in the country, and you come across it in old things. And it was built beside the Cistercian Abbey at the same time as the Abbey, but not necessarily by the Abbey. So then we have, after that, then we have the, come on, Tony, wooden bridge, the wooden bridge which we all know, or a Bailey Bridge, and the Bailey bridges were very prominent during the Second World War. You see them in Kelly's Heroes and so on. And then you have the new bridge bypassed, which bypasses Boyle again. Now, a visit to my friends, Kathleen and me on Shivlin during a week or two ago, inspired me to mention Knockvicker Bridge. Very interesting bridge with its underside easily accessed. A great view of the supporting structure of that bridge can be seen, and it shows you all the elements of the structure with the pillars helped out with these what's called cutwater edges to the effect of it. All these iconic structures have a character of their own. I call it, the town bridge would have emerged from centuries ago when it was probably a shallow ford and so on. The location of the bridge comes first from the usage of people. Connecting routeway in this country in medieval times, there were 3 or 4, and the connecting routeway from Athlone via Roscommon and Boyle to Sligo is one of the 3 or so north-south routeways during the medieval period. It was the crossing facility for the first transport system that emerged, the biannual coach system in the 1800s. There is a magnetic pull on people to look over the walls of bridges and balustrades and flow as the rivers flow through the arches beneath, and at times very politely, benignly, but of course after much rain the tone of the river changes and becomes violent and destructive, as we saw in South Korea television not long ago. Or if you view the bridge from the town bridge down to the Green Bridge these days with the 3 inserted weirs, they were inserted there for purpose. That is why the upper arches are protected by split water stone, more supporting stonework at the base of the arches. In nearly all old bridges, very visible, as I said, at the Not Quicker Bridge. Bridges are places where people were drawn to, as I said, and this town was no exception. Men congregated on the bridge, the new bridge, to exchange cigarettes, maybe borrow the price of the first pint, and local gossip and so on. I knew one of how's my time there? Okay. I knew one of the bridge philosophers very well, and his name was Nolly Derby. A strong farmer once, from a few miles out of town, thought he'd get ready potato pickers on the bridge. Yes, he arrived and asked Nolly if he would facilitate him in that. But Nolly, in declining, suggested, "You should get the people who laid out the seed potatoes in the first place, as they would know where to put them." A good few people have experienced some of the great world bridges. You have one beautiful bridge in Prague, which was the Charles Bridge is called, the Ponte Vecchio in Florence, with its the jewellery shops. When I went into the jewellery shop, they locked the door after me in case someone else put in. They needn't have worried too much. The Tower Bridge, I think Francis in his song, the Seeger song, and of course the bridge in the River Kwai, 1957 film with Alec Guinness and so on. Once an American, it is a kind of a Chris Christopherson moment, Sunday Coming Down, in a famous song. An American visitor to the Boyle, the Royal Hotel, the much loved Royal Hotel, emerged on an early Sunday morning from that hotel. He crossed the road to Noel and his companions and asked stridently, "Does anyone here know where one man with a hangover could get an early morning drink in this town?" To which Noel, my friend Noel, after consideration responded, "No. But I could tell you where two men with a hangover." Okay, so thanks for listening to me. I think my time is probably up.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Noreen Shahan, and I'm a catchment scientist with the local authority waters programme. So I'm just going to give a whistle-stop tour of the status of the rivers and lakes around Boyle. So just to explain who the local authority waters programme are, we're a shared service working on a regional basis throughout the country. So we have 5 regions we have the border region, the western region, the southeast, the southwest and the Midland region. And we have 13 offices across the country. We have 5 managers and 30 catchment scientists. We have also 13 community water officers across the country as well. I have my colleague Tom here, he's hiding somewhere in the audience. And I suppose the important thing to say is LawPro is not involved in enforcement, so it's not. We're based in the environment sections of the county councils, but we don't go out in relation to complaints, and we don't deal with enforcement. So there's 2 sides to it. We have the communities team, and their role is involved in community engagement. So if the local community have ideas that they want to put forth, setting up a rivers trust, putting up nice notice boards around the river, that sort of thing, you can contact Tom, who would be more than willing to come out and talk to the community. And then on the other side is the scientific side, where myself and my colleagues work. We work in an area, we try and identify what's causing an impact on the water quality in a particular river. Now this is relatively new. Like the EPA go out at certain times of the year and they'll take a sample from a bridge, whereas we will actually go out and we'll work between bridges. We tend to walk across land, forestry, bog. We do more in-depth analysis of what's going on along the rivers and lakes to see what has brought down the water quality. So when I said I'm a catchment scientist, essentially what it means is when you picture your local river or lake, it's all the land that brings water to that river or lake. It's the catchment area, and as you can see, there can be quite a lot going on in certain areas. We have forestry, agriculture, you can have water abstraction for industries, you have residential houses, you have urban runoff in a lot of towns, and you have wastewater treatment plants as well. So there can be a lot going on in a catchment. So we're trying to figure out where the issues, I suppose, are coming from. What is actually causing a deterioration in the water quality? This map here might be a little bit hard to see, but essentially on the bottom left-hand corner we've Lough Gara. The rivers are broken up into different names. They're broken up into, I suppose, smaller units for the EPA to monitor, so they all have different names. Now, I suppose the Boyle River is known as the Boyle River from once it comes out of Lough Gara, moves through Boyle and goes into Lough Key, and then you have all the little tributaries up around Currageen Row and Knockficker till it flows out Coot Hall. So you have all the little tributaries that come in from there. You have the Mockmoyne River, which is known locally as the Easky River, that comes in here out at the soccer pitch, and that flows in and meets the main river, and then we have Lough Key there in the middle. Just to say that within the black area has been the area that I've been working in since 2018 to figure out what has been going on with the water quality. I suppose I don't need to tell anyone here the importance of this region in terms of tourism. Lough Key is a big part of the area here, and it's won lots of awards. And I suppose the main reason this area within the black circles has been I suppose under study is because we have two water bodies that have come down in their water quality. We have the river itself and we have Lough Key. So I suppose we're working under the Water Framework Directive, which is an EU directive, and the whole purpose of this is all water within Ireland has to be at least good status by 2027, which is going to be a tall order. But you can see anything above the black line here is acceptable. You have your high status, which is your absolutely pristine waters. You usually get them up at the top of mountains. If you picture a river, say over in Connemara, where there isn't much going on, that's I suppose the mecca of rivers. Then you have your good status. Anything that's fallen below the line is unacceptable in terms of it's not meeting its goals. So you have your moderate, your poor, and your bad. So these are the rivers and lakes here. You can see the Boyle 40 River is essentially the river that's below the Bailey Bridge that goes down to Lough Key, and all the little tributaries that are coming in at the top. That was at good status in 2012, and then it has deteriorated, and it's actually deteriorated further. So it went from good to moderate to poor. The Domain River is actually the little river that runs south of Lough Key. It actually flows into the Finn Boyle Lake, and it comes into the south of Lough Key. The Mockmoyne, which I said is the Easky River. The unassigned actually means that no previous work was ever done on these rivers by the EPA, so we're not entirely confident at what status they're at the moment. The Oakport had some work done on it, so it was at moderate status and it's gone down to poor, and Lough Key was last at good status in 2012. So essentially what we're doing is we are looking at a lot of various different elements. We look at the insects that are living in the bottom of the rivers, our mayflies, our stoneflies, our caddisflies. You'd actually be surprised how much life is actually in a river. So what we do is we do a kick sample, we disturb the stones and the boulders, and we look at what insects are in the river. They give us a good idea of what the water quality is like. You have sensitive species that as this diagram shows, I forgot about it. We've sensitive species, so if you're getting a lot of anything with legs is good, anything that doesn't have legs is not good. So your mayflies and your stoneflies are usually a good indicator of water quality. If you're getting a lot of worms and midges and, you know, freshwater shrimp, they're giving us an indication that the river is under pressure. We also have various different probes where we measure the oxygen and the temperature of the river. This is particularly important, I suppose, if you had algae blooms in rivers. Now, algae blooms can be quite natural in some ways. It's like the river has, I suppose, what you call maybe a cold. But if you're getting persistent algae blooms in a river, we're looking at the oxygen levels. The algae use up a lot of oxygen. That's why you get fish kills. So we use a lot of, I suppose, probes. We're using our kick samples. We have a lot of visual, I suppose, visual assessments as well, where we look at the algae, we look at the mosses that are growing in the rivers, the plants. Some plants, if you're getting a lot of disturbance, say if a river is being cleaned out with diggers, certain plants will sit in the sediment that's in the river. So we have a good indication when we go out by looking at the plants and the algae, if the river is under stress. That's just a moss plant there. So I suppose that was a very quick tour of what we do. Myself and Tom will be holding a practical demonstration on Saturday at 2:30 for anyone that would like to come. We'll meet here at King House and then we'll proceed hopefully down to the pleasure grounds here at the back. If it doesn't rain too much between now and then, I will venture into the river and we'll do a kick sample. We can show you the insects and talk a little bit more, because I know I've thrown an awful lot of information at everyone, but if anyone has any questions after, just come up and ask me. So, thank you.
Hello everybody. I brought you a box of aliens. I was going to pass them around, but there's too many people here, so please, if you'd like to come up and see them afterwards, please do. I'm going to talk to you about a few of them, and most importantly, I'm going to talk to you about not spreading aliens around. Okay, so when I started working on Lough Key in 1998, I was very fortunate to meet up with Pete Walsh, who took me out on the lake for many years. And when I mentioned aliens to him, he started laughing in the way Pete could and said, "Oh, are you talking about the UFOs then?" So he had to tell me all about the UFOs and the stories around the UFOs. But I explained to him that there were introductions into the lake that could cause a lot of issues to the ecosystem in Lough Key and in the Boyle River. And he and other people in the locality were always very interested in what we had to say when we were carrying out our surveys. So we did a number of surveys for the EPA and also just some independent work. I work in the Atlantic Technological University in Sligo. I'm an ecologist, an environmental scientist, and I'm passionate about protecting our waters. So Noreen just gave you a very good story about our waters in Ireland and what we're supposed to do to protect them. But sometimes people don't realise that this is part of everybody's responsibility and not just for the few. So I'd like to just maybe tell you a story about one or two of the aliens, because I don't have very much time, and then tell you about perhaps what you and your families can do to protect our waters. Because some people say, what's the point? They're here already. Why would we bother? Does it really matter? Yes, it does matter, because we're talking about our natural heritage here. And, you know, when this house was built, there was one invasive species in the catchment, most likely. And, you know, we had a talk earlier on about the Cistercian Abbey. So the monks most likely brought us our freshwater crayfish, which is now considered to be a protected species. And that was probably our first invasive species. They also brought in some of our coarse fish, which many of you are very fond of fishing, so we won't bring them into the conversation because that tends to be a little contentious. So I'm going to stick with the 20th century here and start off by talking about the zebra mussel. So, you imagine Lough Key, it's 9 square kilometres, and it is naive. The fauna are naive. They're used to just dealing with their own species in the lake, the plants, the invertebrates, little insects and snails, the fish, and then all of a sudden, the zebra mussel arrives. Interestingly, it was introduced in Limerick, where the water's near Limerick, and as we all know, the Shannon flows the other way, right? So it didn't get here by natural means. It was introduced on the hulls of boats that were brought into the country, were brought up the Shannon, and then these mussels, who were about the size of your fingernails, up to, we counted, I think, over 10 million of them 17 million of them estimated on a Guinness barge. So each of those producing up to 30,000 young. And suddenly they're in the lake, and within 1, 2, 3 years actually, there were billions in the lake. And just to give you an idea of the impact of that, the normal flow through Lough Key is about 60 days, right? That's what we call the retention time. But the zebra mussels can filter up to a litre a day each. So they were able to filter the entire volume of the lake in just 10 days. So you can imagine how that affects the whole of the food chain, because all of a sudden, the very small creatures no longer have that algae available to them that they were able to feed, because the zebra mussels are stripping that out. They're very, very effective. And then, as my mother used to say, what goes in must come out. So they were pooing all over the bottom of the lake and changing the whole of the ecosystem, basically. So that's one invader in the lake. In recent years, we've also had the introduction of the Asian clam, another filter feeder. And more recently, we now have quagga mussel, which is a very close relation of the zebra mussel. But unlike the zebra mussels, who can only grow around the stony edges of the lake and the stony edges around the islands, the quagga mussel can grow in the mud at very, very deep depths. So this is also a high filtering species, so we don't really know what type of impact that's going to have on the lake ecosystem. So these are a few of our invaders. We also have weeds. In Lough Arrow has a big problem, I know it's in a different catchment, with the Nuttall's pondweed, and we were doing some work on that, and if you drive around you'll see some signs around Lough Arrow on the CAN Interreg project, which I was involved in with my teams in May to You. So some of our invasive species have come here. Who spreads these things deliberately? Very few people. They're spread accidentally. And all you really need is a fragment of a plant, or you leaving your boat in the water for over the summer period and then moving it to another area, or it being in your bilge water for it to spread. So I'm asking you, on behalf of Irish Conservation, to beware of aliens. And this is the last project we had. And you can find this on the internet. You can find, if any of you are teaching or involved in community groups, there's a whole series of outputs here to explain how to check, clean and dry your equipment, and how just about the whole education. There's a very nice animation. It was a European project, so we made sure that the animation had no language in it, just to explain to people about how they can prevent spreading plant and animal species into waters, rivers and lakes. So have a look for those. Very nice materials. There's also quite a lot of materials on the Inland Fisheries Ireland website. So we call this biosecurity, and as you know, New Zealand is really good at it. New Zealand is good, and we should be good because we're an island and we can actually keep species out, but we're not. So we don't have a lot of enforce regulation in this space. We're working on this. There's now a new national steering group for invasive species, which I'm on, and we're trying to work on being more preventative. But really, it's everybody's responsibility to do this, and it's something that we can all do. So, let's enjoy our lakes and rivers and leave them in a really good state for future generations. And it's incumbent upon us really to do that. So I hope I haven't ended up on too serious a note, but thank you very much for listening.
Good evening. Good evening, everybody. My name is Michael O'Dowd. About 30 years ago, I was lucky enough to get a building to work in. That's just beside the main bridge in Boyle. It's on the southern side of the river. About 20 years ago, we built a building that presented me with the third floor vista, or view across the short river landscape. So my view is essentially about 200 metres from the bridge itself upstream towards Freiburg. Now, I'm very conscious of the fact that I'm privileged to have that view. It's an absolutely beautiful place to work. No matter how the job is going, no matter how you feel, if you look at your river will give you some inspiration, even in your darkest moments. Over that period of time, I've had an opportunity to, I suppose, become aware of the landscape that's there in all its shapes and forms. On the far side of the river, there are trees, sycamore, beautiful chestnut, changing with the seasons. Every day I go in, I observe them, I note the little change. I can see autumn starting, I can see the leaves starting to fall, and I know that it will all come around again and we'll all start. The river itself, I always associate with the seasons or with the changes in life, and I suppose it starts with the swallows that sometimes arrive around at the end of March or early April. And the first place you will see them is gliding along the river. They'll be about a foot off the surface, and obviously there's a lot of midge and fly life that encourages them, but it's always the advent of summer. It's a very special time when they come. Excuse me. Shortly afterwards, and surprisingly, there's quite a few mayfly hatch upstream of the river in Boyle, just opposite Lovage, or the stonehouse as we used to call it there. And when the mayfly hatch, I noticed the smaller birds, the wagtails, the grey wagtails, the yellow wagtails, even the sparrows take up position. And obviously they've nested and have their young to coincide with this time of plenty. And as the fly rises off the river, you will see the wagtail rise up with it, grab it. Sometimes they have 3 or 4 in their mouth as they head back to their nest. Now it's very tempting to spend the whole day watching this and get very little work done. But anyway, I have on one occasion as well, it was very early in the morning, I have seen the kingfisher fly down towards the bridge in town. Excuse me. It just did the turn, it didn't go past the bridge, it did the turn and went back upstream again. I saw the colours, I saw the flash, and I was excited for a week afterwards, telling everybody. The sort of residence that was there, but I don't see there near as much now, is the little dipper, the little blackbird with the white breast. It's a beautiful, beautiful bird. It used to take up position on the front of the bridge, the main bridge in Boyle, dive underwater, do its feeding underwater, come back up. Usually people pass over and back on the bridge and they don't actually look over. It's a very shy bird, but if they don't look over, he's quite happy to keep fishing, and I'm quite happy to keep watching him because he goes down, he spends a certain amount of time. Apparently he's a good indicator of water quality, and certainly in the last 2 years he's getting very rare. I had him for about 20 years, very, very common. Definitely in the last while, it's becoming quite an occasion to see them. One of my favourites, sort of to indicate the autumn experiences, when the river rises, you get big floods in October, November. the eels start to make their journey down from Lagara, down to the river system, heading towards their breeding grounds in the Saragossa Sea. And across from my office, the heron used to take up his position, the big grey heron, on the banks there at Freiburg. And early in the morning, if you were lucky enough to be there early, you would see him. He would stalk for hours, but he would generally, at some stage, make his kill. His head would flash underwater. There would be a momentous struggle, terrible shaking and moving and so on, but there was only one winner. And the heron would eventually present his prize, which was quite a considerable eel. And it was a marvellous sight. I used to think I'm in the middle of a town and I'm watching like something from David Attenborough. It was a marvellous experience. And he would hold up the eel and proudly look at it or examine it. And then, of course, if it was a small eel, he could eat it whole. But if it was one of the bigger eels, which was usually the case, he had to put it down. And I could feel his frustration, because he could look at this lovely eel, but he had no facility to apportion it or to cut it. But he would leave it in the water's edge, in among the grass. And it would drive the scavengers mad. The magpies would come, the grey crows would come, but they couldn't access it because it was in the water, albeit out of the flow of the water. So he would come, and he would leave it there as though to mature. And he would come back over the course of the next week, maybe 2 weeks, maybe longer. And I would see him, he would come in, he would examine it, and as it started to rot, he would peck at it, and he might even apportion it. And I've seen him break the smaller bits off, and then eat that whole. So it was a whole experience. Now, in the year, I would see them on average catch maybe, I would have this experience about 6-7 times, which was fantastic, considering we're in the middle of a town. The last couple of years, he hasn't appeared. So I have no idea whether the eels aren't there or he's lost interest or whatever's happened. But as well as that, in that same spot there was a little moorhen, right? Again, very rare in the centre of the town, but she was there, excuse me, and she was hidden in the grass on the far side, and she only emerged very occasionally. But I always waited and waited, and around May she would appear out onto the river, the proudest mother you've ever seen, followed by a little chick, usually only one. She might have had more, but I could only ever see one. Very careful. She's a very proud mother, a very brave mother. She's all excited, all agitated, and she brings out her chick and she brings it back and hides it in the grass. Now, the last time I saw her, she went back to her spot, and about a day later I saw the mink coming upstream under the bridge and making his way right along the spot. Now, I didn't see the mink catch her, and as in my profession we'd say it's only alleged. But I think he has certainly had something to do with her demise, but I haven't seen her since. Now also there's a lot more activity there, and there are more dogs around, which wouldn't encourage wildlife. But it was quite an experience. It was fantastic, considering we're in such a landscape, so close to a town centre. I know most people pass up and down and they don't even pass a bit of heat on them, but certainly I thought it was a great privilege. I had one occasion, it's about 5 or 6 years ago, I was working, and in the corner of my eye, I caught the sight of an otter coming downstream. And she had 2 cubs with her, 2 3/4 grown cubs. And it was a sort of snowy day. And the cubs used to go in onto the bank at Freiburg, and they'd play and come back into the river and play. And just to give you an invitation in the contrast of interest, I got so excited I ran to my colleague next door and I said, quick, there's an otter and 2 cubs, once in a lifetime. And he was reading something and he was looking at the window and he says, oh yeah, and he went back to reading. So it just shows you what stimulates one certainly doesn't excite another. But I thought it was a great privilege. And certainly I have seen the otter a few times, not so much in recent years. It's quite difficult to see him. I have a great advantage in that I'm on the 3rd floor and I'm looking down. So you can barely see the water break. The mink will swim on top of the water, but the otter will just barely break the surface. He's very discreet. But I have seen them, and I saw them about 2 years ago, just about up from Lovench there, just slightly above it. Did quite a few tours around its river spot. and then disappeared. They're very shy. What else do I do? Oh yes, as the water levels drop, and the sun, if the sun is right, I get a great perspective of the river bottom, so I can see all of what's going on. And I'm mostly watching the trout, the young trout, and the activity, the vibrancy of the trout is they're excited in summer. They get their early food coming downstream. They're shooting left and right. They're taking their fly off the top of the water, and sometimes I will see the pike stalking along the reeds, just straight underneath my window, and he's there. He might sit for 2 days there, waiting. I haven't seen him make the kill, but it is quite a perspective, right? And again, I realise that very few people have that privilege in their daily work to go in and have this entertainment there for them, provided, of course, you have the interest. What else have I got? Oh yes, I can also see a perch sometimes. I can see roach. I can see the odd eel as well on the river's floor, making his way under a stone. He usually hides under a stone and makes his way out. There was an old man who lived upstream, up the river, where Bernard Maguire had that bridge that we referred to earlier, and he told me that in the 1920s and 1930s, this man is long since dead, that before Archaeology was built, there was a gravel bed on the river across, just right where that bridge is. And he said the salmon were so big they were like pigs. He said you could see them, he says you could nearly walk across them. And he said Rockingham, of course, had the fishing rights at that time. And he said they had a gamekeeper on each side of the river bank because they were so sensitive, so concerned about that particular spot. And they had the river hooks put in the base of the river so that if somebody threw in a net, it would get caught in the hooks. But unfortunately, obviously we have no salmon now. But what a memory from just a mile upstream, or a half mile upstream. Absolutely beautiful. What else do I have here? No, I suppose the thing I see most often which concerns me the most is that bloomin' mink, right? One of your invasive species. I mean, if we ever took a walk around the shores of any lake or any of the bays of the lake over the last 20 years, the last 30 years, you hear the sounds of the water birds, the coot, the moorhen. Right? There's terrible silence now. Those birds build their nests, and their nests are not accommodated at all. We absolutely wipe them out. They're incredible killers. And I really think there should be a big emphasis on trying to remove them as a scourge of the environment. You know, and they're not that hard trapped either, because I've actually done some myself. Anyway, the other thing I see as well, occasionally I see a cormorant. And the cormorant will fish, which is very unusual to see in the town centre. About 100 metres, maybe 150 metres upstream of the bridge. He comes every so often and he does a bit of fishing, and he's a fantastic fisherman. He has a huge success rate. I see him coming up with this fish every so often. And if it's a fish with a spiky spine, he'll turn him around or juggle him around until he swallows them so that the spine is going backwards. And he can swallow him whole. Marvellous sight. Right in the centre of a metropolis, shall we call it. Anyway, I think that's my observations for what it's worth. The river has provided me with an unbelievable stimulation and lifestyle. I go to work every morning, no matter how good or bad the job is, no matter how well you feel or how bad you feel, you will always be better for being near a river and observing or having its energy pass you. And it is certainly wholesome. Right? And I hope we manage to protect it and give it some more respect into the future. Thanks so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm from Boyle and I've spent a large portion of my free time on fishing on the River Boyle itself. But the first thing I'd like to draw your attention to was a memory I have from my father, who in 1921 saw black and tans shooting salmon off the bridge in Boyle. Now, you'd never see that today for two reasons. One, because the ESB institution at Archaeology stopped them coming for a long time. And now the salmon in general are dying slowly did the same presentation here about 3 or 4 years ago, and that made my next door neighbour, a lady called Margaret Gann, to do a presentation on the Boyle River Remembers, which is very well worth looking at, and if anybody's interested, I can have the internet information available. Now, the Boyle Canal is something that everybody knows. It was finished in June 2001, and it came about by Chamber of Commerce being approached by the County Council back in 1995-96, when they were proposing to have a bypass of the town, and what could be done to alleviate the commercial loss through the town. So there was a lot of people at the meeting, and were humming and hawing and humming and hawing. And I said to them, could they bring the navigation closer to the town? And that's exactly what happened. They built the canal over the next 2 years, and it costed 2.2 million. Facilities for 26, 27 boats mooring, toilet facilities, washing facilities, etc. for the people coming on the canal. And within 10 minutes walking in the town, so the Boyle Canal is a compensation for the bypass. When I settled in Boyle in the late 60s, I ended up buying a 10-foot fiberglass boat with a flat back end. And I spent a lot of time going up and down casting for pike mainly. But one day I was in an area just at Tinnicara, broad area after a very fast moving section of the river. And I was standing up on the boat casting, and I had a ladder down with me in the boat at the same time. I casted, dog moved at the same time, and I ended up in the river, which is normally not a problem because I can swim. But there's only 2 feet of water, and it was 6 feet of very loose sediment, which I couldn't get any grip on at all. I was going down and down and down. And the last minute, the boat drove flat, slid past me, got on the back of it, and over a space of about half an hour, I succeeded in getting out, and all wet, but no harm done. In the same area, across from where that accident had happened, I fished maybe for 10 years, and every time I came down past it, I cast into the spot opposite the Crown Oak. I invariably hit a fish, which proceeded to break my line, or stood up from the bait, and I couldn't figure out what it was. Fishing for pike. Eventually, about 5 years ago, coming home one evening, I cast one spot in, turned out to be a 6-pound trout, which I landed. Now, the last thing I have to say to you is, I was aware of Loch Garra back in the 50s before it was drained, and over a period of 2 years they lowered the lake by about 6 feet and uncovered a lot of agricultural ground. I feel in today's conditions with climate change and heavy rains coming and various problems like that Loch Garra should be refilled up to the pre-drainage levels in the 1950s. The benefits would be that if Garra was controlled by a weir at Covenant Bridge, they could let the lake fill up during the winter, ease the flooding down around the Shannon Callows, which is getting worse and worse every year, and let the water out slowly over the summer, generating electricity for, again, compensating the generation of electricity. And of course, trout fishing on the Garra was brilliant in the pre-50s years. Some of the best trout fishing in the whole country, for me, in particular. There was a hotel in Montreal which was reintroduced, it would be for the benefit of area tourist sites as well. The only problem is that the land that has been recovered would have to be compensated by the European Union. That would take some time, but I've talked to a number of people who operate around the lake, and if they got decent compensation, they would have no difficulty in coming into line and let the project take place. Thank you very much.
Evening everyone, my name is Kim Baxter. I am from the Inland Waterways Association of Ireland, or IY for short, if you don't mind me using the acronym. We are an all-island association, voluntary association set up in 1954 to oppose the building of low bridges across the Shannon that would have blocked the navigation forever. Currently we have 25 branches across north and south, and of course we have a branch here in Boyle River, of which I am a very proud member, and have been since 2009. And I was honoured to be elected the president of the association in April of last year, and I've only another 18 months of penance to go. But there we are. Like all the branches, as I say, we work to promote the restoration, maintenance and use of abandoned navigations across the island of Ireland. And we in Boyle River are no different. We've had various successes down through the years, but I suppose our most recent and most obvious one is we lobbied for a very long time to get the canals in Rockingham, the canal under Drummond's Island Bridge and the Rockingham Canal, reopened for use by small pleasure craft. This was the state of the canals prior to the work being done. They were overgrown, they were blocked by fallen trees, etc. And if you go to the next slide, as part of our campaign, we realised that the Drummond's Island Bridge was 200 years old in 2019, so we used that as a persuasion tool, shall we say, to get the canal reopened for the bicentenary. And this is what the canals look like now. As a result, we have over 5 kilometres of flat calm trails suitable for kayaking, canoeing, rowing, small fishing vessels, ribs, etc. And as a result of that, we've had a new business set up in Lochee. We now have guided kayak tours based from the Old Stone Pier in Lochee. So tomorrow is promised to be quite a dry day. So if any of you are visiting the town and want to see the results of our work, why not go to Lochee at some point? Don't want to conflict with any of the Arts Festival's events, of course, but go to Lochee and take the kayak tour and see what has been done. Of course, it's not all about boating. The river itself is all about peace, solitude, enjoyment and family fun, where necessary. But we as an association, we encourage anybody with an interest in the waterways to join us to help preserve our waterways. As I said, we go from everything from cruisers to rowboats to sailboats, etc. And even those that don't have a boat can enjoy the waterways as well. They can pretend they're on the water. We have other projects in mind. We're at the moment, James talked there about Boyle Harbour in 2001. Boyle Harbour at the moment, Boyle Harbour currently isn't particularly user-friendly in that the way things have moved with the electrification of boats, etc. So we are currently lobbying with Waterways Ireland to get power bollards installed and also to get an accessible jetty installed. The jetties, unfortunately, were designed by somebody, I believe, who'd never set foot in a boat. And they are not easy from an access point of view, so we're hoping at the southern end of the canal that we will get a floating jetty with an accessible walkway for people with disabilities to also be able to enjoy and to join the Boyle River from Boyle Harbour at that point. In addition, and I suppose it's probably an even more challenging project, we are looking at the other two remaining canals in Lough Key, those going to Finloch and to Heel Loch. There is beautiful waterways there too. There's a beautiful loch on the way out there, which is, and the stonework is still amazing in it, but it's in danger of becoming completely destroyed by tree roots and that. So just this year we're starting a project that's more challenging than the reopening of the previous canals, because the land that these canals go through is on private ownership, so it's going to take a lot more work. But we will keep working on, and that's all I have for you this evening. Thanks very much for listening.
Hello, Neil Stewart from Boyle here. I'm talking about Hydropower. I'm actually chairman of the Irish Hydropower Association as well, and look after several hydro plants. Boyle River had 4 hydro plants on it. The country used to have 6,500 mills, which today there's only about 600, I think, still standing. And there's only about 30 have hydro plants running in them at the moment. The 4 sites on Boyle started. The first one at Glebe Mill, where my great-grandfather first came to Boyle in 1880. Bernard Maguire's Bridge, if anyone saw it there. And the weir was taken out in that bridge when the Loch Ara drainage was done, so that hydro plant is finished. The next hydro plant is the Stewart's Mill downstream, which is still running today. And then there was another hydro plant at the New Bridge, which I've now learned is called. And there was another Stewart family lived there, and they made ice back in the day, before the refrigeration came along. And then the monks would have had some water power, and that's why they chose the location at Boyle Abbey there. Great-grandfather in 1900 went to America and bought turbines, because the mill was water wheels at the time, and he was way ahead of his time, because he came back with the turbines and the generators to generate electricity. So Boyle became the first town to be lit up outside the cities. So he had chosen DC power, and if anyone knows anything about power, what we use today is AC, alternate current power. Direct current is something that you would use, like in a battery, that would be 12-volt direct current. We're not quite sure why at that stage he chose DC, because in 1880, Edison and Tesla and Westinghouse were battling about whether AC or DC should be the electricity of the day, and Edison invented the electric chair, and he was DC, and he wants to make sure it was known to be dangerous, and that's how it was viewed, or he tried to make it viewed. And Tesla, who was working for him, invented the 3-phase motor, which had to be AC. And this is in 1880, and grandfather went to America and maybe picked up cheap generators, because people were throwing out DC at that stage, and put in DC into Boyle, which stayed in Boyle until 1966, and we were the last site to change the ESB when the ESB took over all of the electricity in Ireland. So Boyle today still gets its power from the mill. We export most of our electricity, 130 kilowatts, which would light up the town of Boyle all the time, which it is today with the current floods that are in the river. And I like James Camden's idea of blocking up Loch again and getting the flow steady down the river, because that helps Hydropower to have a bit of storage behind it. But we'll join that campaign. So, so in 1990 we renovated the turbines in the mill, and we still have the old turbines in the mill, and we are hopefully going to display them at some stage. But anyone who has been around Boyle, at the top of the mill road there's an old engine there, and that was the engine that generated the power for Boyle when there was no water, or assisted the generation of power when there was no water there. And so if you were in 1960 wanting to hoover the floor, you had to come and rent a unit to change the electricity from DC to AC, and then you could hoover your floor. And so it was probably a bit annoying for people at the time, but that's the way it was. So that's all I have to say. Obviously we're hoping that there'll be future development in the mill, and we will move on from there.
How's the volume? Is it okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Late November, in the first week of October 1998, I was standing next to my bicycle on a road next to the Boyle River in County Roscommon. Light drops of rain fell. That sort of autumn it was. From my coat pocket, I removed 2 handfuls of small stones and placed them in a circle shape in the grass next to the river. I returned to my bicycle and I sat amid the grass and I gazed at the landscape around me. I took in the feeling of the space and I could taste the air. While looking in the small stone installation, I thought that just maybe the wind or the rain or the sky full of stars would witness its simple beauty. Under the soft sound of the flow of the water, my thoughts took my memory to my very first time in my childhood when I first saw a river. I was aged just over 4 years of age. The river in question was named the Minneburn, that flowed through the farm where I lived and was contributed to the River Lagan, which was the main river of Belfast City. I would run through the long grass as quick as I could to find my precious places next to the river that became a sanctuary for me, a place of learning and also solitude. During my lifetime, I've lived in a few places and by chance always near a river. I've lived in Leitrim and Roscommon for the last 34 years. On my arrival, and within myself, I felt it was my home. Here, I would cycle around Leitrim, Roscommon, Sligo, Mayo, Galway, and Cavan. I rode my bicycle over many bridges while not even knowing the names of the rivers that flowed beneath them. When I was invited to be part of this wonderful evening, I thought of my own life's journey as a river of journeys. I remembered the circle of stones and trust of what, being a small event that to this day gives me idyllic images from that memory. And I think that maybe, just maybe, the image of another person standing looking at a small circle of stones by the water's edge, by the river, would come true. In our present fast-changing world, I admire all of those in this county via the network and others, who through their work and their passion for protecting our landscape and nature, that for me is so wonderful. And for me as an artist, nature has been my main inspiration, be it visual or be it words. I think we need a green flower for the 5th of June World Environment Day to be worn every day. My sincere thanks I give to my dear friend Michael Ewing and to Alan Owen and the other workers who made all this happen and who spent a lot of time and were invited me to attend. I will finish with a spoken word piece entitled The Boyle River Flowing. Boyle River flowing. A river that wanders on its own private journey. It dips and twists, flowing, flowing. Life preserver, tumbling only through tumbling turbulence, to slide to a silent movement, becoming peacefully calm, while flowing, flowing, flowing. Leaves of trees, coloured green, are reflected to leave visuals, changing with the rays of the sunshine, non-stop from the camouflage amid the greenery. Birds are singing over abandoned meadows, awaiting the season's change, nature fermenting in the wide space of each day, while under a remembered rainbow, the distance is silence, as reflections of it all gives us, the viewer, the impression of art. We admire while whimpering to the complete visual abstract of it all, while it flows, flows, a delightful, admired river, always flowing. Thank you.
was during the lockdown when this first came online on the Zoom. Everybody was meeting on the Zoom thing. I was actually working on a piece of music that I was making by recording the sounds of the river as it flowed through the town, especially under the bridges and things like that, where you get those kind of sounds. So I was also making a short video at the same time. So I just offered it to Michael and he accepted it. So I was very happy that you get to see it, and very pleased that, thank you very much.